Hi, this is Jim Norris from Backstage Insider. Good day to everyone. And we have with us today Bob Deeth. Very hard to describe what Bob does. Depends what year it is, I guess, but he must have a very huge business card. Um, but we're gonna go back to the early days first. I was reading your bio earlier, and I understand you were born in Hong Kong, which is kind
That's right.
of like,
Yeah,
and
both my parents are British, and back in the day, it was a British colony, and a lot of folks went out to the colonies to, find their fortune. And my mom and dad were there working, and that's where they met, and that's where I was born. And my dad had an opportunity to come to Canada, and he took it, and I'm forever grateful for him because
yeah. And how
I could have been a toffee nosed little English boy.
how old were you when you came to Canada?
I was only four, but it's interesting. I kept my English accent until about grade three, actually. So,
Wow.
which was kind of funny. But then, off became fully Canadian.
And you got a British Columbia accent, right?
That's right.
So, were your parents musical at all? Did they have interest in music or any kind of background?
Actually, well, my dad sang in choirs when he was a kid, but yeah, it was never a priority in our family. I guess my mom had me in some Montessori, early education program, and they noticed an aptitude for music, and she just got me into music lessons early on, and it was just became sort of the center of my life for well, forever until now. So yeah,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
So how old were you when you started playing music?
Probably, five or six, started getting piano lessons, and did group lessons at first, and then did classical and jazz training when I was a teenager. And you know, I don't regret anything in my life. I've had an interesting life. I kind of wish I'd followed my heart and at least done my undergrad in music as opposed to history, and got those extra years of training. Because the first thing I did when I got out of law school is start a band and went on the road, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's great. So how did you decide to go into law in the first place?
Well, I'm the eldest son of a person who had expectations, and I love my dad, but I probably did the right thing, as opposed to maybe, like I said, following my heart a little bit more. But the irony, and this sounds terrible, but the best thing I ever did for my music, uh, career was being a lawyer. Yeah, because I remember, seeing some of the deals that we got with, like, our US deals and our other things as an artist. And, I was able to not get, for lack of a better term, screwed, so it was, and then being able to really get on the business side of the music industry early on,
Right.
that helped. It helped a lot, I think. But,
Oh, that's for
but you
sure.
still need to have the chops, right?
Yeah. So were you, I assume you were playing while you were attending university all
Yeah,
during
I
that
mean,
time?
more amateur, playing piano at restaurants, or we had some university bands and played at, in the student lounge and things like that. So nothing majorly serious in that sort of period. But like I said, as soon as I got out of university, I got right back in when I moved back to Vancouver, and yeah, that's where I met the guys that turned into Rhymes with Orange at the end of the day. And that was quite an experience, and I learned a lot during that period, I must say.
Well, that band had a fair amount of success
Yeah,
back in
no, we
those.
we did pretty well. It was a lot of fun until it wasn't for me, anyway. It was a struggle, like every band, and I think one of the challenges with any band is keeping it together and
Right.
persevering. And my situation got complicated because I was trying to practice law at the same time as I was a touring artist. I mean, my friend Kurt Dahl, who was an associate of mine, in One Bad Son, and he's doing the same thing. He's practicing law and playing in a band, and they're doing really well. So it's a difficult path to choose, but it's one that can be done. Obviously, I eventually had to get off the road, and that was tough for my relationship with the band, and we ended up parting ways. But I was at that point more management and running the label and doing all that stuff by the end. But that
Wow.
actually really helped me launch my own duo, which was Mythos, which was the next thing I worked on, which was a partnership with a classical acoustic guitarist, and we just happened to hit a really amazing time in the music industry for electroacoustic music, and it just took off. It was we got nominated for Juno. We signed to a major label deal in LA. We did 3 records with them. We've got over 100 million streams. It's like it's
Wow.
interesting. You never know. You never know how things will go until you just try. And I really didn't expect commercial success with that one, but maybe that's why it was commercially successful.
Yeah, could be. Thinking about the lawyer band combination, that of course nowadays would actually be easier with all the online things that you can do as a lawyer. Because I know a few lawyers that do quite a bit of stuff, with Zoom calls and all these other
Yeah,
things.
I mean, when I was well, this I'm dating myself. I've been practicing for over 30 years now, so even 35 years. Well, who's counting, right? But
Yeah,
when I started, we didn't really have computers in the same way as we have now. Is certainly, I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. We had to use fax machines. We had to use landlines. The cell phone technology was, you had those bricks back in the day, but even then, it was very early in the '90s. It was just starting out. No internet, so everything was completely different. So much harder to do a practice uh, on without being physically there. And now my practice is, I would say, 90% virtual. I have an office in Vancouver where I can go, but I don't have an office there. I mean, they're fantastically supportive of me, but I don't have to be there as much because most of my work is outside of the office. So it
right.
works great. So you're right.
Yeah,
And now
and
with
with a
AI, you probably
tool.
won't even need lawyers, right?
Well, not sure about that, but
No, just
and with the tool like the iPhone, that type of thing is just amazing. The number of things you can do no matter where you are,
hmm Yeah, no, it
and a lot.
really is. It's quite extraordinary how things have
Yeah,
developed. And the funny thing is, everyone always thought, the more technology we'd move to the 4-day work week. But what I found was my experience with my law practice is the more the technology developed, the higher the expectations client has for things to be done immediately. So
right.
it actually all it did is put more pressure on you to turn things around in a much quicker we did in the past. So now the expectations are huge. So
Yeah, with the cell phone, they expect that you're going to be on your cell phone 24 hours a day, and worst case, they send you a text and you get back to them in 5 minutes.
I know.
So it's there's good and there's bad to it all. So, when did you get involved with Music BC? When was that in the
Well,
scheme of things?
I'll never forget that because my first day at the office was September 11th, 2001. I
Gosh,
know, right? It's like,
I
oh,
remember
is
that
this
day.
an omen? And actually, one of the first projects I did was a fundraiser for the 9/11 fund, and we had like Sarah McLachlan and Brian Adams and 5440 and a whole bunch of other artists that we did a CD, and EMI kindly put it out, and we raised, I can't remember, 15 grand or something for. And I actually got a letter from Mayor Giuliani, which I was very proud of at the time. But now I'm like, oh my
Wow.
lord, I gotta burn that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was there for, and before I was the executive director, I was on the board. So I was actually involved for a number of years before that. But then I became the executive director and then was that until 2015. And that's when I started my political runs. Yeah,
Right.
that's where it
Right.
all.
So tell us how that happened. How did you end up from being a lawyer slash musician slash
Mhm.
industry person to being a politician.
Well, in British Columbia, I mean, around the 2008 period, and it was happening across the world because of the global economic meltdown after subprime and all that. A lot of governments, especially on the right-leaning spectrum, used that as a justification to cut arts funding to the bone, and that we were part of that sort of culling of arts funding that happened in British Columbia, and so we actually lost 100% of our operating funding at Music BC, and so I was highly motivated at that point to try to turn things around, and at that time, and I won't name the minister, but the minister came into my office because we put out one little blurb in the Georgia Straight about our funding being cut, and I was basically muzzled by this minister who said, you ever give my government a bad name, you'll never see another penny again, and that kind of stuff. It was like,
Wow.
so I really experienced what I felt was, the really, I don't feel these people should be representing us, and so I kind of at that point was really pushing hard to get our funding back, and then later on, we just weren't getting anywhere, and so I decided, okay, the only way I'm gonna make any changes. At the same time, I had a brother who's schizophrenic, and our mental health systems were problematic, and our we had, you know, portables for our kids' schools, and I'm like, okay, okay, enough's enough. I got to get involved. So I got involved, ran in 2015 federally, and unfortunately lost. But bit of a silver lining because that kind of got my name out in the community. So I won in 2017 and was able to be in John Horgan's government, and then won again in 2020. And then John Horgan, unfortunately, he passed away, and David Eby is, and I've worked with David Eby, and then 2024, unfortunately, lost by 97 votes. So that was a bit of
Well,
a heartbreaker, but that's politics. And so now I'm doing law, I'm doing government relations. I just rewrote my book, like we were talked about earlier, my music business book, and put that out again. And so I'm actually getting back to a lot of the projects that were sitting on the shelf for the years I was in politics.
right. Well, that's good. Well, it's good. It's all good experience.
But yeah,
There's no doubt about that.
yeah.
I mean, politics is so different from business.
Oh,
Just
totally. Yeah. But I think it's good. I mean, Jim, you've been in business a long time. I mean, and I have too. Having that experience and then coming into government is helpful because if you run small businesses, you know the pain people go through, how tough it is, and I think it's helpful in caucus and being able to talk to ministers about the tough bits for running businesses. So I think it's helpful to have folks like that in government. And I was lucky too because John Horgan made me the parliamentary secretary for arts and film during the pandemic, and that was just like the perfect job for me at that terrible time. But it was like exactly where I needed to be at that moment because he said, "Look, Bob, I don't know the industry. We want to come back to festivals and theaters and restaurants and pubs and music venues. You've got to keep the lights on." That was my task. And so we had, $35 million in Fairs Festival events funding. We ramped up money, another 35 for BC Arts Council. We put quite a bit of money into just helping folks get through a really tough time. And even after the pandemic, we kept that Fairs Festival events funding going for a couple more years. So I was really pleased to be in that place at that time to be able to help because ultimately that's why I got in the first place, and my expertise in the business and knowing so many folks, I was just helpful to sort of pull the team together and get through it together because it was as you know, Jim, it was especially for music, especially for anything live, it was just brutal. It was just the most brutal time. So and we lost venues, but we kept a lot of venues too, so I'm really proud of that.
so as far as government funding today, where do you feel that that's at
Well, it's
in the
tough. I
scheme?
mean, it doesn't matter what political stripe you are. I mean, Alberta just posted a $9 billion deficit, and that's conservative. Quebec, $9 billion. Ontario, and BC's posting a deficit. So it's really tough because the GDP growth, when I started, was 3.5%, which made healthy revenues for the government. But now it's under 1%. So the revenues are just, they're negligible in terms of what you need. And then, of course, on top of that, our real estate market, the same in Ontario, is really taken a hit in the last couple of years. So that those revenues from property transfer tax and things like that are not there. Every government is struggling right now with tariffs and with all the challenges in the world. And so it one of the first things to go is often arts funding, and so I think there's a lot of advocacy work to be done in this area. I think the government has protected at least the core budget, but the problem is a lot of the funding comes out of year end money, or like we have a program called Amplify BC, which has been great, but that was funded for 3 years out of year end money, and there's no year end money coming for quite a while. I can't see, unless there's a miracle or something. So then the question is, how can we fund those programs, and what can we do? So there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm worried about. I'm worried about us losing momentum, certainly out here, because if we don't have the provincial money, we can't leverage the telefilms and the factors and all these other national programs. And so yeah, there's a lot of work to do. It's a tough times. I wouldn't. It's tough to be in government. Period. Right now, I would say
For
it doesn't
sure.
matter what your politics are. It's just tough, and you take it on the chin for that. Everybody gets like blames the government for the tough times, and yet so many times it's from the outside coming in, and that's really tough to see. And I see my colleagues having a tough time because they want to do a lot and there's no money to do it.
Right. I noticed that our prime minister was at the Juno Awards, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, no, it was good.
That
That was kind of fun. Rush playing. I was like,
yeah,
that was so cool. And then, yeah, I got my Rush tickets in December, so I'm pretty stoked to see their drummer. She seems fantastic, and
yeah,
they see, and
yeah,
you know, Getty and they're playing like really well. I mean, you'd never know how old they were or how long they've been sort of away from live performance. So that was fun to see, and it was nice to see the prime minister out. That's always a good sign for the music
it
industry.
is.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll keep getting support to the various programs of the Canada Music Fund and Factor and others that we really need. Canada Council. So
And the new Rush drummer, she's got a very educational background. She's very schooled
very
and
academic, and
and teaches, and it's kind of amazing actually. Great player, of course.
oh yeah, but I mean, it's a real. I mean, you need someone like that who's I mean, how do you play? I mean, how do you step into the shoes of probably one of the greatest rock drummers of all time? With Neil Peart. I mean, that guy. Everybody was being in awe of him. So you really need a professor to analyze the complexities of his playing, because it was just, how can you keep such a great beat and still have all that other stuff going on? I don't know. I mean, I was always in awe of him. I grew up
Yeah,
being a huge Rush fan, and I went every year. They came to the Coliseum in Vancouver, and every year, and they put out pretty much an album every year in the '80s. So I mean, it was like every year it was just like, yeah, it was fantastic. And then anytime they come back, I finally took my kids. But the funny thing was, I talked to Geddy Lee actually, because he was at an event for CIMA, the Canadian Independent Music Association, and I was on the board, and we were giving an award out to their management. And anyway, so I was sitting near him, and it was funny because at the time there was this thing called Guitar Hero for the kids, and so they were playing.
right.
My kids were young and playing Guitar Hero. My At the time, my 8-year-old, she's 20, 22, and you know producing music now, but he came up to me, Dad. He's like, Dad, and, pulled on me. He said, Dad, have you ever heard of a band called Rush? And so the actual bonus track in this Guitar Hero was YYZ by Rush, and it was like, I told Geddy Lee that. I'm not sure if he got a kick out of it, but I did anyway. But I said, like, there's a whole new generation discovering Rush because of video games, and I thought that was so cool. And I'm taking my three of my children to the show, and I can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. So that's my Rush stuff.
So with the new book that you've just brought out, is that the third version, or is
Yeah,
that
so this is the third edition, and so I don't know if you remember, Jim, but I put out a career in music, a 12-step program. Then I put out a second book, which was career in music, building your inner circle. And then the second
right?
edition, I kind of put them together and then rewrote it. And then I put out some sort of in between updates to the edition. And then it's the same basic format, which is basically how to work in the music industry, how to get, how to build your career, and then the team members that you might want to build once you've established yourself. And I've kept with that formula, and just revised it, brought in artificial intelligence, talked about way more about digital than I did before, and how important that is. And I mean, in many ways, it touches the surface, but I hope that artists, see these sort of buckets they need to work through, and don't forget about important parts of building their career. And I mean, I always like to
Right.
think, if all the mistakes I made in the first 5 years of my music career, if I could have, done, not done those, I might have done much better, much more quickly. So the hope is to try to truncate the amount of time artists take to figure it out, because otherwise you're sort of stumbling around in the dark, like I did.
Yeah, well, I think everybody did. There just wasn't the information available in the olden days, of certainly when I was playing, there was the only publication there even was in those days was Downbeat.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
that was it, and of course, there was nothing like the internet, and there weren't even any books on the business. It was all of that came much
Well, I
later. So
remember the big, thick "This Business of Music," and it was written by a couple of
that's right.
lawyers, but it was like reading, a legal tome. It was not written for to me, written for musicians. It was more written for the
Oh,
industry, and it was very dense. And
yeah,
so when I came at this, I'm like, okay, I'm a musician. How can I write this in a way that
yeah.
actually talks to musicians and doesn't like make their eyes glaze over and they shut it after the 10th page. And so that's the hope.
That
Yeah.
book
Yeah.
that book was at that time was the only one. I mean, it was brutal.
I
Um,
know it was tough. I mean, the reason I did it is we actually were running a program called the Peak Performance Project with Jim Pattison Broadcasting out here, 102.7, and we had gotten some Canadian content development funding for 7 years, quite a bit, like over $5 million. And so we developed this artist development program, and each of the mentors and people we brought in all brought in so this different bits that the artist needed. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we pull all that together, in a one place? And so that was sort of the motivation for it, so you could really sort of dive into all the different areas we were talking about, whether it was songwriting or recording or digital, social, live performance, you name it. Just try to dig into all those bits. And we had people like Tom Jackson out. We had I learned so much from all those folks who participated. So being able to sort of crystallize that and get it out was helpful. But now the challenge is, how many people are reading books. So I've done it as an audiobook now. So it's available. I think a lot of people will listen to audiobooks when they might not necessarily read. So I've done that. And like you, I'm trying to think of other ways to get the information out. I'm hoping to turn the
for
book into
sure.
maybe a course of some type, or some sort of interactive course where it's because I'd hate to, just because the format isn't maybe what folks are interested in now, that they don't get that information, because I think it's more critical than ever. It's just, and what is it? 78% of artists have less than 100 followers or something on Spotify. Uh, very few streams. I mean, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. And then when I started out, we didn't know what was going on, but at least there was sort of there was a pathway. There was a pathway to success. If you followed it, there was venues. You go from one venue to the next to the next. You could sort of work your way up the ladder. But now there's like bits of the ladder are missing. And so how do
Yeah,
you get up the ladder when that's 10 feet above you, and you can't get to it? So I think those are the sort of challenges artists face today, and I can understand why they're despondent and why they they feel that the streaming world isn't helping new artists because, frankly, it isn't. I'm a big believer that the streamers should be paying like the broadcasters did and put money into development because that's the only way I feel the independent artists are going to get a chance in this world because you can't do it by the old days, which was doing in-store concerts and listening posts and all the stuff you could do to get people interested. That just doesn't exist anymore.
Right. So what are the in a couple of sentences, what are the changes in the industry since you wrote the first book? Obviously, AI is one of them, but aside from that, streaming, um, since the first book to the newest version of it, what are the major things that have changed for artists?
Well, I would say, I mean, streaming is critical because it deals with a lot of the differences in how artists approach it. Because how do you get your music streamed? Well, then you have to look at everything from TikTok to Instagram to YouTube to all these different ways to get the word out. But I'm still a big proponent of getting out on the road and doing that work, and I still push for that sort of connecting with fans one at a time, and then using social media to amplify. So if you don't have something to talk about, it's very difficult for people to get interested. So you need to engage artists. So part of that changes in some respects, getting people back to the basics is getting, look, if you really want a career in the music industry, you've got to be prepared to go out and do that hard work. I know it's hard, but if you do that, you look at someone like Dan Mangan. I met Dan, uh, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I can't remember, but, playing for five people at a local market. And, he basically went out and built his fan base one person at a time. He would go to the merch booth, he'd talk to people, he's personable. Now he's got this army of people who love him and will support him up for the rest of his career. And if you can do that, you can have a career. And that's someone who's a singer-songwriter. That's not someone who's really in the pop industry or in the more the highly commercialized industry. And I think that kind of approach is better for sort of a long-term approach. Now, having said that, you could do something viral on TikTok, and I've got one client. We just signed a big deal, and she did a she just blew up on TikTok, and she has the goods to back it up because she plays live, and she's just got a big deal, and it's fantastic. So there's different pathways, but I still think you got to be able to deliver it live, and that's one of the problems with these TikTok artists generally. I've seen so many of them that blow up on TikTok, and then the first concert I see them, they're terrible because they've never had to play live, and all of a sudden they're thrust into the limelight. So I always like to say, you have to be ready for your success and make your own luck. And so I still, maybe I'm old school, but I really do believe it's critically important to build on live. And then the chapter on digital, I mean, I could literally change it every day. It's so volatile. I'm trying to keep it more general because the algorithms change, how you go in, Spotify for artists change, everything keeps changing, and how you can access playlists and all these things. So I've done my best to give a good overview, but that's a tough area because it's so volatile and changing so quickly. And then of course, one big area is artificial intelligence kind of wraps through the whole book because we don't know where all things are going, but we also have to be careful that you look at some apps now where you see completely AI generated artists being put up on Spotify, and where's this all going? And then for creation, I mean, where is the line between creation and using AI to write your lyrics for you and to, write your music for you? And is that where's the law on that? Where's the ethics in that? There's a lot that's going to happen very quickly over the next 5 years. So it's something to keep an eye on. And I worry for creators generally. I worry for creators because it's their AI is getting better and better, and that's a problem. And of course, if it's getting better on the backs of all of our creator copyrights, then that's a problem. And there's a lot of lawsuits going on right now in regarding that. Just saying, look, you're creating these models these models based on our work, our songs, our copyrights, our sound recordings, and you're emulating. So it's derivative of what we created. So is it really creation, or is it just regurgitation, or putting different bits together? So I think we've got a lot that's going to happen over the next little while. So I guess we'll see where it all goes, Jim.
Yeah, mentioning importance of playing live, and you were talking about Rush earlier, and that's certainly an example. When I was a musician many years ago, um, Rush was just starting out, and they were playing a style of music. I guess it was controversial. I guess you'd call it. Not everybody liked it,
Hmm.
and they certainly didn't have a radio. They had no record deal. They had nothing really, but they played constantly for very small audiences and built them up one fan at a time, and a lot of those fans are still going to Rush concerts, and they're probably in their 70s and 80s now. Yeah. So
I'm still going.
so
Yeah.
they're an example right there that, and that, they've always used technology as it went along, but in the early days, it was out on the road playing for, as you say, getting one fan at a
Hmm.
time, and way before there was social media, the word of mouth with Rush fans was just so enthusiastic
Hmm.
that people would drag all their friends out. So and, it still can be done that way, that's for sure.
Well, and the other thing too, Jim, is making a living in the industry. If you think about how tough it is to make any money on streaming, if you're an independent or new and emerging artist, where is the money going to
Right,
come from? Well, the reality is it's probably going to come from live, and it's going to come from
yeah,
merchandise, and it's going to come from
right.
endorsements, and it's going to come from that side of the business. So if you're going to make a career, yeah, I'm not, for everything I say, there's an example. Someone will say, well, what about with this band? Um, true, absolutely true. I mean, there's been some bands that have just blown up online and done very well, and that's fantastic. But I would say if you really want to try to make a living and sustain it, the money is probably going to come more from the live performance side of the business than from at least in the early days, streaming. And then once you become an established artist, well, actually, the streaming is fantastic because once you look at the established artists right now, and you look at the big deals that are going on, Jim, I'm in the middle of a deal right now where, these companies are buying publishing uh, companies up all over the world because there's a sustainable revenue. Once you've established a track record of revenues, then you actually can put that out. It's a really good investment. So it's a really good indicator that once you get established, there's actually a very long tail in terms of revenues from your music in streaming. But you have to get established, and that's the catch 22. And I think that's why so much emphasis is being put on established catalog artists now in terms of touring and dusting off old bands and bringing them out on the road again, because frankly that's kind of where the sustainable revenue is. It so the point is that the goal is to get to that point, and then streaming makes sense. Then streaming's fantastic. I mean, I'd say with my own group, and we're sort of mythos. We're sort of a middle of the middle. We're sort of middle class. That's called middle class band, right? Middle class artists. But we got established because of the major, and those streams are established, and they just keep going. I mean, we just, like I said, we just surpassed 100 million. I'm sure it'll just keep going. It just keeps going. And sure, 100 million
That's
isn't,
great.
like, in the grand scheme of things, is not huge in terms of the billions when you're talking about the Taylor Swifts and those types. But you can make a reasonable amount of money once you're established. So I think that's the goal. But if you put too much energy onto that at the front end, you're going to get disappointed because you might get 10,000 streams or 100,000 streams, and you'll get a check for $50.
So, with your busy career and multifaceted career, how have you managed to balance the time with your family during that time?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, luckily, I have an incredible partner. My wife Kim is. I think all of us in life, that we can't do what we can without our without an amazing partner. And we had 5 kids. Well, not together, but I had 3. She had 2. We blended the family, 17 years ago, and They're all siblings now, and it was hard work to get there. But yeah, definitely during the 8 years I was in government, it was hard. It was hard, and it was because when you're in the parliament, you're there Sunday to Thursday, and you're in another city, and then the weekends are taken up with local events, and so I really was very lucky to have that, and then I did miss a lot in that stretch, but like I said, it was I wouldn't I wouldn't change anything. I was very lucky, and I didn't do it until the kids were a little bit older, so had them when they were younger. I did travel a lot because, as you know, in music, especially if you're working in the trade side of it, you're at all the markets. You're in MEDAM and Popcom, and you're out in Australia, and you're at in Brighton every every year. You're at all these different things, so you're traveling a lot. And that was tough when the kids were little, but they luckily they're great, and now I got a grand my first grandchild coming in May, so I'm very
Great.
excited about
Excellent.
that. And my kids say, "You can't run for politics. You're having a grandchild." I'm like, "Well, yeah." Anyway, but yeah,
That's
you're right,
great.
Jim. Finding that balance with your family is tough when you're trying to do so much. But I was very lucky.
So, if you had to give one piece of advice to an up and coming artist nowadays, what would it be?
One piece. I would say be nice to everyone. I think one of the things is that artists do get frustrated, and understandably frustrated. And I think if you're having the sound guy is not doing everything right for you that night, kill him with kindness, and because as I like to say, when I met Alan Reed, who was working in the stockroom at A&M Records when Rhymes of the Orange was signed, um, we had some issues with delivery to stores, and we could have been nasty about it, and we didn't. We ended up making friends with Alan, and Alan became the vice president of A&R, and now he's running the Juno Awards, and I was in government. And the point is, it's about relationships. The business
Right.
is about relationships. So you build relationships, be kind, and don't you have to manage your expectations, because it's a long road, and I think you have to persevere, and I think perseverance is critical. um,
For sure.
so anyway, I know that's more than one sentence, but it's all part of the same thing, right?
Well, for sure. So if somebody wants to buy the new book, what's the best way? Is it Amazon or
Yeah, they
what's
could,
the
or they could
easy?
just go to a careermusic.ca, and all the options are there, whether they want the audiobook or Amazon or buy directly or anyone. So a careermusic.ca.
Okay,
And
that's great.
yeah, and then that's easy. I just kind of tried to put all the different options, because I really want people to have whatever access they like the best, whether that's.
Right. Great. Excellent. Well, thanks a lot,
Well,
Bob.
thanks,
It's
Jim.
been
It was so nice seeing you again.
good seeing you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll let you know when this is out there. And then good luck in all your future
Thank
endeavors.
you. You too.
Take
All the
care.
best. Bye now.